episode of Grange TV. We have with us a very, very special guest, Mr. Stitch Duran, Jacob Stitch Duran, famous guy. I'm big fan of this guy. I wanted to actually, I never had the opportunity to work with him when I was working with Rob. He was exiting as we were coming in. So, well, Rob was already there, but he was exiting with the UFC, which we'll probably speak about. But man, absolute legend. He's done it all in the fight game. He's been in 6 movies, written 2 books, worked on a million different cuts, million different types of fights, boxing, kickboxing. Was in the Air Force, was a field worker. Man, you've done it all. Thank you so much, Stitch, for joining us.
Well, no, thanks, Fabricio. It's a pleasure, man. You know, we had a little chat before they started, as they say in Hollywood, in the green room, right? And I think we're gonna have a fun show, man. And you know, I was telling you I have stories, and you know, you have any questions, I'll give you an answer.
Nah, man. Well, I don't know, man. I guess let's start with who's Jacob Duran, and when did he become Stitch Duran?
Yeah, well, Jacob Duran I'm still Jacob Duran, but it's funny that a lot of people don't even know my real name at this point, Fabricio. But you know, I grew up, like I said, I think you mentioned that in the intro. I grew up as a farm worker in the San
Can you
Joaquin,
explain that? Can you explain what a farm worker is?
San Joaquin Valley of California. But a farm worker we're the guys that are picking the fruits and vegetables that you eat. So I grew up in California, which is the Central Valley where I grew up, is the agricultural capital of the world. So they have just tons and tons of different vegetables and fruits and all that. And we were the ones that were picking them and putting them up in the stores. That's what my job until I got out of high school. So literally that's what we did. But I was born and raised in what they call a migrant camp. And my address is CBC number 12 for California Packing Company. But we literally lived in housing supplied by the owner of the crops. And we would work for him. And you know, so I started off like that. And, you know, even though we had hard times, we always had plenty of fruits and vegetables. And, you know, my parents would, you know, kill goats and cows. And so we always had meat, pigs and all that. So we, you know, we lived a comfortable life, but very humble people. And I joined the military in 1972. They stationed me in Thailand in 1974. And, you know, when I got into the military, I always I said, if I went to the Orient, I would want to study the martial arts. This was during the Bruce Lee era. And they stationed me in a place called Thailand. Shit, I didn't even know what Thailand was. This was kind of like towards the end of the Vietnam War. But I saw my first Muay Thai fight. And that following Monday, I started training. And they had Taekwondo. They had Koreans teaching the GIs. And the Koreans left and the Thais took over. And they kind of transitioned us into the Muay Thai system. And getting back to the States, I opened my own gym of kickboxing with a credit card. And I was a trainer. I was a manager and promoter and a Cutman. And being a Cutman kind of floated to the top. And 26 years ago, I made the move to Las Vegas. Then it was only boxing. And then the UFC came and I started working both of them. So here I am talking to you.
Why did you gravitate towards being a Cutman? How did you gravitate, I suppose?
Yeah, like I said, I was a trainer, and even when I moved to Las Vegas, I mean, because I worked with boxers also, and when I moved to Las Vegas, I didn't come to be a trainer because I thought all the great trainers in the world were here in Las Vegas. But as I saw guys doing pads or coaching guys, I thought, you know what, I could do that. I've done that before, you know. So, but I always had a job, so I couldn't give you 150% of my time. And these were all professional fighters. So they would hire me just to do hand pads. So I'd go and, you know, I've done pads for Mike Tyson and Johnny Tappan. A lot of guys, they would hire me for that during my work. So I would sneak off of work and go do hand pads. But being a Cutman just kind of floated to the top because it was an individual effort. And one-on-one, I made a difference with fighters. So that was my main concentration. And my first coming out fight in Las Vegas was Raul Marquez fought Keith Mullins, and Raul Marquez was the IBF, I think, super middleweight champion, and he ended up with 5 cuts, 2 big ones, 2 here, 1 on the nose, and something like 70 stitches altogether. And I kept him in the game. He defended his world title, and that just kind of put me in the forefront of who is this guy. And so that's how it started. And you asked how the name Stitch came. Well, when I had my school of kickboxing, if you remember the movie Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme, I think everybody has seen it.
Yeah,
well, Dennis Alexio, which was a kickboxer with the brother in the wheelchair, I used to work with him. And I also worked with one of his sparring partners, Dave Rooney. And Dennis had a fight in California, and Dave Rooney was on the undercard. And he ended up with a small cut. Now, knowing cuts as I know now. But I used to see Cutman get tape and rip it up and then make butterflies. So I did that to Dave Rooney, and Dave says, "Hey, you send me some stitches, I'm gonna call you Stitch." And from there, that name stuck. And years later, they told me David's somewhere like in Alaska as a fisherman, but I don't think he knows, or maybe he does realize how that name has really kind of changed my life.
Going back to you when you were a farm worker. So you would work in a farm and you'd go to school?
Yeah. We would. It's funny. That's a good question. Well, for the most part, the crops when they were ready to be picked were in the summertime, which worked out great. But in my little town of 1,500 people, which were all farm workers, it would balloon up to about 5,000 because you would get farm workers coming in from Mexico, Arizona, California, Texas to come work the crops, and so. Yeah, that's where it started, and from there, humble beginnings, and never forget where I came from, and that just kind of inspires me to this point to do what I do.
You wanted to be a baseball player?
Yeah, that was my game, man. I love baseball, and I played 4 years varsity ball, but growing up as from little league, I went up to did all the different organizations as they went up, and being that I grew up in a small town. Nobody really paid attention to us. So I walked on to a college in a town 9 miles away from our town, our little town, but I didn't have a car. So I would go to school with friends, and after school, they would go home, and I'd stay and I'd practice with the team, and it was doing real good, but then I would have to hitchhike home, right? So I did that for a little bit, and being that I grew up as a farm worker and naive, I didn't know anything about grants and scholarships, talking to the coach. So I just joined the military and lost my opportunity. But when I got to Thailand, I'll never forget, we get there like 4 o'clock in the morning, and all these, I'm thinking I don't want to be in a combat zone, but I drive up and it's the base for the B-52s where they would load them with bombs, go to Vietnam, drop them, come back. So all these Jeeps are driving up to the plane with guys in camouflage and 60 caliber machine guns and say, what the hell am I doing here, right? So we go to the briefing, and one of the first questions that the guy asked is, anybody here play baseball? And I did. Boom. I said, So I got days. He gave me day shift, and I never got to play baseball because I studied the Muay Thai system. But he probably thought, oh, man, I got me a Latino. What position? Third base. Oh, man, give this guy days, right? And I never took advantage of it. But here I am in martial arts.
So when you got there, you were in Thailand. You started doing. Did you start doing Muay Thai or
Taekwondo?
Right, because the Koreans were still there. Am I
the Koreans they were for about I think two or 3 months, and I was there for a whole year. And then they left, and then the Thais came in, and maybe it worked out great because my legs were real good by then. And then they transitioned us into more of the power shots and more of the techniques, and so we transitioned into the Muay Thai system, which is nice. So
How much Muay Thai did you do? Like how many years and how often would you do it when you were stationed there?
Well, I had my own school of kickboxing when I got back.
But while you were there, while you were stationed there,
that whole year, that whole year, I ate, slept, and shit Muay Thai. I mean, literally, my instructors, we became friends, and like I said, being that I was a cop, so we would guard the base, and they would, let's say I was in the tower. Or I was in a gate out in the middle of nowhere, I'd be stretching and I'd be, and it was hot and humid anyway, but I'd be all soaked and wet just from working out on my own. But yeah, that whole year I dedicated my whole life to that. And that was quite awesome because Muay Thai was literally a non-existent sport in the United States. Nobody knew what it was. Everything was point karate. So.
So when you got back, you said you started the gym and everything with the credit card. what point did you go, this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back home. I'm going to open up a gym. I'm going to open up a kickboxing gym.
It just happened. I had no intentions. I didn't really know the system of what I'm doing now. It just happened. Actually, when I got back to the States, I lived in Oakland, California, and I met a guy there, and we walked on to. I got into boxing to improve my hands because the legs, the knees, elbows, everything was real good. But I wanted to round myself off, so I got into boxing, and from there I started outside of training. I started training amateur boxers. And that's where everything started progressing. And when I moved out of Oakland, I moved to Fairfield, California. That's where I met Dennis Alexio. He was in the gym training, and he's slamming the bag with kicks, and I'm slamming the bags with kicks, and he don't know me, and I don't know him. And he came and introduced himself to me, and from there I started being one of the trainers with Al Lagardo. And from there, I just, I was training world champions, traveling the world, and that's how I learned to wrap hands, and I learned to work cuts, and that just kind of floated to the top. And but yeah, I made the move to Vegas 26 years ago. Picked up my family and moved, and then took like a $25,000 a year cut and pay just to move to Las Vegas to follow my dreams. My wife supported me, my kids supported me, and we went through hard times originally, and then things picked up, and now I can say I can do this full time.
How many kids do you have, Jacob?
4. I have 4 children, 5 grandchildren. 3 of the kids live here in Las Vegas, and then 1 in Indianapolis. So, they all studied in they all studied from kids in the gym that I had. And the gym is called ASK, the American School of Kickboxing. And so Javier Mendez, which owns AKA, I used to work with him when he was the champion, right? And when I left, he opened up his gym, and it was AKA. I said, "Hey, man, what are you trying to do? Follow my initials or what?" So I was the first guy with 3 initials. So nonetheless, yeah. So
you worked with Javier at your gym?
Yeah, not in my gym. I worked with him as a cutman when he fought, because he lived in San Jose. That was hour and a half away. But Scott Coker, which now is the president of Bellator, he used to promote kickboxing, and my fighters would always fight on his card. And of course, Javier Mendez was part of Scott Coker's team, so I would always work in his corner also as a cutman. So,
can we talk about the whole thing with the Reebok deal and that?
Sure.
Because I remember, like we said off air, I remember I was working with Rob at that stage and a couple of other fighters that were coming through, and like Burt Watson, I always wanted to. I like talking with people. Obviously, I have my own podcast, and so I always wanted. I like when people ask me who are the guys that you'd like to speak to. I always like to speak to like the older dudes that have the stories. You know what I mean? Like, and that's I've always wanted to speak to you and to Burt and to a couple of other guys there. But we didn't get a chance to work with you because I remember sitting down, UFC speaking to us about what the deal was going to be for the fighters. And I remember because I was sitting down with Rob and they were talking and we were just listening. And then I could hear Mark Hunt. He was like, I've known Mark forever, for like 20 years. You know, he's like, I've known him forever. But he was sitting at the back and all you could hear like this, like, he definitely was him, because it was a big islander like voice, just bang asking shit, not happy at all. And then not long after you were gone. You spoke about it and then you were gone. So we never had a chance to work with you. So I guess that's where my thing is. But I want to know the mentality behind you speaking out, and I want to know what the conditions were because as we were talking, we don't have to get into numbers. But as we were talking about off air, there's all these rumors of what the cutmen get paid, what the guys that wrap hands get paid. And honestly, man, like for people that don't know, these guys that do this job, that do the cuts and wrap their hands, I don't know what they get paid, but to me, it's not enough because without you guys, there is no fight. Like, can we talk on that?
Yeah, sure. Ask the first question.
Man, just let's go back to those, I don't know, what was it, 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago? And what what was a Cutman then? So what did you do? Like how did you'd come in? You'd have your little vest on, and your vest would have all its sponsors and that, and you get to work. And you and a bunch of other well-known Cutmen, but you were probably you were the most well-known Cutman. So can you talk us through that transition, pre-Reebok, post-Reebok, costs, benefits, etc., of working that open-ended question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll go from square one. So I was working. We were talking about Scott Coker, and he used to have strike. He would always, when he fought in Vegas, he would always bring me in. But this one was K1 Kickboxing at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, and he brought me in. At that time, the main event was Bob Sapp and Chemo, and Mike Tyson was in the audience, and Dana was in the audience. I've known Dana for years before the UFC. He's the one that brought me in, but he asked me for my card, and the next day he says, we bought the UFC, and would you like to be a Cutman? And at that time, it was only Leon Tabbs. Leon Tabbs was the original Cutman from UFC #1, right from Philadelphia. Oh, geezer, and I'll tell you, remind me to tell you a story when we're in Sydney, all right, at a Chinese restaurant. So anyway, they had brought in Burt Watson, which is the coordinator, and Burt Watson had worked with Joe Frazier, Don Kings. He was the behind-the-scenes man. So I thought, give Dana credit where credit is due, because he knew that MMA was such a new sport that coaches didn't know how to wrap hands or didn't know how to work cuts. So he brought in professional boxing cutmen, myself and Leon Tabbs, and Burt Watson as the coordinator in the back. So our job was to work the cuts for everybody in one corner and wrap hands for those that didn't know how to wrap hands. Well, it seems at that point, nobody knew how to wrap hands. So we had Leon and I had a lot of guys to wrap. So we brought in Don House as the third cutman. And so Don House, Leon Tabbs, Burt Watson, and myself, this program that all MMA promotions use, bringing in cutmen, doing the techniques that we have, that we established, we put that program together, which is the best and safest program to take care of a fighter. So all these other people that work other organizations, if you notice them, they wear gloves. They got the wrist wrap here where you put the swabs there instead of in your mouth. They apply Vaseline here. All the techniques that we do, they implement, which is smart. In boxing, if you notice, some of the guys, for some reason, they got that macho thing that they want to be identified as a cutman. So they'll put the swab in their mouth and they'll put it in their ear, and all that is filthy. So we put that program together. And in doing that, then we started getting sponsors. One of my first sponsors was Zions, and Zions turned out to be one of the companies that the UFC bought. But what I had done is I had put on my glove, I had put a sticker that said Zions right there. And as I'm working on the fighter's hands, that was a prime location. But the UFC says you can't do that because you created a prime location for these guys. Good idea, But nonetheless, we started getting sponsors, and I had my own T-shirts from Bad Boy, from Tap Out, from One More Round, and so these were my sponsors as we went down the road, and then of course the Reebok deal came in. Fighters were making. I mean, I'm sure Rob was making $50,000, $100,000 a fight. If definitely now he would have. But a lot of these guys were making more money in their sponsors than they were with the fights. Me as a cutman, the same. They weren't really paying us a lot based on what we do with boxing and for one fighter, much less what we do for MMA, all the fighters. But I needed the UFC for exposure to get paid on sponsors. Well, of course, the Reebok deal came, and I think you went to attend that meeting where they showed all the new uniforms, and they introduced the program to you guys, and right off the bat, fighters hated it, coaches hated it, fans hated it, media hated it, and so on and so on. Well, they did the same thing to the Cutman. They got us together and says, you guys can't wear any more sponsors. So I tried to negotiate for everybody and get at least an increase in pay because the money they were paying was not sufficient. But they said there was no money, just the respect factor that they gave us. So John Nash from Bloody Elbow called me, sent me a message and asked if I'd be interested in doing an interview on how the Reebok deal affected the Cutman. Well, growing up as a farm worker, I go back to those days when my parents were fighting for unfair practices, and treating farm workers not as good as they should be treated and respected. So I thought about them, and so I did the interview, and I think the interview was, in fact, I know it's very politically correct, but maybe the point said that, I had to concentrate a little bit more on boxing because boxing pays a lot more to pay my bills. I had to pay my bills. Well, anyway, that article went viral, bro. All over the world. It just exploded, and I'm getting messages and tons of messages. I mean, my phone is just going crazy, calls and job offers, and this before. I'm getting all these, and so I get a call. I'm at Costco with my wife shopping, and one of my friends, because we're all friends, right? And he says, "Hey, do you have a moment to talk?" And I knew what the conversation was going to be about. And I said, "Nah, give me about an hour. I'm shopping. Give me an hour." Well, two of my friends called at that time, and one of them, his voice is cracking. And the only thing he said is, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. And of course, it was a little slap in the face, no punch. But I kind of held my ground, and I expected it. So I'm reading messages, and the first text that I read from a guy that's supporting me, now I know his name was David Estrada. Don't know where he's from or anything. I responded back to him, and I said, I want you to be the first to know. The UFC let me go for speaking out about the Reebok deal. Now I got to find a new job. And Fabricio, that shit went viral. Bang, everywhere. 1 week I did like 57 interviews. I had camera crews coming to my house. It was the biggest thing in MMA. I had Bad Boy, Robin Offner from Bad Boy, which was one of my sponsors at that time, called me and said, "Look, Stitch, we want to do something for you. We'd like to make a T-shirt for you, and all the proceeds go to you." And at that time, I was driving to the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas to do a radio interview, MMA Junkie Radio. And I had gotten so much positive feedback from you, so much, that at that point, that energy level was so high because I'm in the back seat. I'm reading all my messages, and my son is driving, and my wife's in the front seat. And when he called me and told me that they wanted to make a shirt, I started crying just because the energy was flowing so positive. And then another moment is a friend of mine, Robbie LeBlanc, that has a thing, Motivational Mondays, on YouTube or whatever it is. And he said, well, today's topic will be about a good friend of mine who spoke out about unfair practices and lost his job, is Jacob Stitch Duran. And he's giving me all these accolades, and I'm watching the video. Here where I'm in the same chair, the same spot that I'm talking to you. And once again, man, I start crying. And my wife walks in, and she's looking at me because all this stuff is happening. She don't know what's happening, right? So I show her the video, she started crying. But that was all the positive message I got. And, Rising gave me a call, and just so many companies gave me a call. And, at this point, as I look at it now, it's the best thing ever happened to me. And I think what I did for the sake of the little people. And, I'm working these top ranked shows, ESPN shows here at the Mandalay Bay, at the MGM, not the Mandalay, at the MGM. And a couple of weeks ago, Andres, which is one of the Brazilian coaches, I hadn't seen him since those moments. But he says, he goes, Steve, he goes, I want you to know that we as coaches and we as fighters couldn't speak out. You represented us because we couldn't speak out because we lose our jobs. But we have so much respect for you. And that's been things that have been going on since then. When I did the first Creed movie, real quick, is Wesley Snipes comes up to me after the movie and shakes my hand. He says, "Hey, the UFC did you wrong." So, when Wesley Snipes came up to me, I knew that I was in pretty good hands, and I knew that the world knew what I knew. So all this, and Karen Bryant asked Dana, well, what about Stitch? Is Stitch ever coming back? And he said, nah, Stitch will never be back. And that blew up in his face again. And that started the whole syndrome of F Dana, F Reebok, F UFC. And even the guy from Reebok called me, Fabricio. It was that crazy that he says, hey, look, we had nothing to do with it. I just want to let you know you're a good man. You've always so-and-so, but we had nothing to do with it. And I understood, so Yeah, that's what happened, bro. So, always speak up for what you know is right. And, if you take a hit, you take a hit, but I think I took one for the team. And I think guys like Rob and just all these other guys will appreciate it.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I have here is, can you take us through the life of a cutman? So, for example, why I say that is the guy goes in, he works a whole evening, but and we're going to get into the whole thing in a second about like people don't understand. The guy's cut, say somebody's cut here, right above the eyes, maybe where that little vein is, and it's pouring out blood. You get in there, and maybe you didn't see it get cut halfway through the round. Maybe he gets cut just before the bell. So you didn't even see him get cut. It's just bang, he gets it. You run in, he's split open. You've got 1 minute, not really a minute. You've got less than a minute because things. So you get in there, you work on him. That guy's gone. You either saved him or you didn't. You know what I mean? Or the doctor's going to come in and the doctor's going to say, can he see? Can he not see? Whatever. You put adrenaline, you put Vaseline on it. You got the coaches there, like around you, going, "Fucking do it!" You know what I mean? Fix this.
Yeah.
The fighter's going, "Man, fix this." You're out of there. You probably wrap the dude's hands. I'm just trying to give people an understanding from what we see, what you guys do, and to me, every time I look at you, I'm like, I don't know what. I always think this when I see the guys working on them. I always think whatever you're getting paid, it's not enough. And then I've heard all sorts of rumors about what they get paid, and it sounds like it get paid a lot. But I think like you need to have a very high level of specialized knowledge to be able to do that in a minute. It's not. It looks great, but you need to really know what you're doing. And so what I want to know is the life of a cutman. Are these guys able to just live off being a cutman, doing that, or do these guys need to do other jobs? Is it enough money that they're getting paid from the UFC to support their families or not? I'm not saying this to bag the UFC or anything. I just want to know what's real, what's facts. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a good question. That's an excellent question. Really, nobody's ever asked that, but the answer is no. This is a job that you have to do as a passion. I'm probably the only cutman that I could say I could do this full time. And so, these guys always have to have a job, just not that much. And you're talking about the pay. I would probably put myself out there and say that the ring girls get paid more than the cutmen. And that's probably a true, honest statement. So in the UFC, I could say that, right? And
really,
so
like the ring girls get, because I know some of the ring girls get paid very little money.
Well, I'm talking about the ring girls in the UFC.
Right.
The ring girls, and then you're probably talking definitely the top ones, right?
Right.
The Arianes and the.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I could almost guarantee you that they get paid more than the cutman. And I've always said I've made a lot of money for a lot of fighters, but you're right. When there's a situation, let me go back into the reason you were talking about the doctor. The reason that a doctor will stop a fight is or a referee is when a fighter is at a disadvantage. That's always key number one. Always number one. Whether you're getting tapped out, whether you're knocked out, but whether you got a cut that's bad enough that is flowing into your eyes, or you got swelling where your eyes is closed, that's when the doctor makes a determination whether you could continue or not. Our job is to minimize that, to eliminate that. And there's a lot of times where a doctor will let the cutman work based on the experience that the cutman has. So in other words, if you're a rookie cutman and you're working on a bad cut, the doctor knows that, or even your technique is wrong. Just because you're a cutman don't mean that you're good at it. Just because you wrap a good hand don't mean that you're a good cutman. And that I want to make that perfectly clear, because hundreds and hundreds of people can wrap good hands, but not hundreds and hundreds of people could be good cutmen. It's all based on the techniques that I tell you that we put together. But the adrenaline chloride 1000, that's the medication you put on a swab into the cut. That's a vasoconstrictor, so that closes up the blood vessels. But it's all based on technique. So, but that's a good question. And like when the UFC let me go, like say I tried to, because when I would get sponsors, and let's say I had Bad Boy as my sponsor, Tap Out as my sponsor. One More Round is my sponsor. I would go and negotiate for the other guys. Of course, they weren't going to get what I got paid, but you get 2 or 3 different sponsors, them getting paid. Leon Times bought himself a Cadillac. So what I got for these guys, I always represented them. And when the UFC let us go, I tried to at least get an increase in pay, and they said there was no money in the kitty, and so that's where they're at now.
So a guy like Leon Tabs or Don House, would they have to have second jobs to supplement their income as cutmen?
Yes.
What do they do during, like, what are their jobs? Because I don't know if people know who these guys are, but Don House is like another well-known cutman that you see in the UFC, and so is Leon Tabs. Like, they're the guys that you always see with the guys working their cuts and that. So would they hold pads for people, or what would their second jobs be?
Well, yeah. Well, keep in mind, in Leon Tabs, I'm one of the legendary cutman, and when the UFC had their 100th show, I tried to have him nominated for the Hall of Fame, but that never happened. But anyway, Leon Tabs worked with a lot of top boxers, Bernard Hopkins, other boxers in the boxing industry. I'd say that paid more money than what the UFC pays a cutman. So he was self-sufficient in that. Same thing with Don House. He trained a lot of fighters, but Don House was also a savant when it came to inventing stuff and creating stuff and all that. So, they always had a different job. I always had a different job. I worked for corporate America for 23 years, and like say, remember I was telling you, I was a trainer, but I didn't have the time to train fighters full time and give them 100% because I had a job. And it got to the point now where I was working enough fights. I averaged 40, 45 shows a year. And with sponsors and all that, it became to the point where I couldn't give my job 100%. So I had to make a determination. And the company I was working with, RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company, they downsized, so they bought me out for a year. They paid me for a whole year. So that was a good gateway for me to leave and concentrate fully on boxing. But we all had jobs, and I'm blessed to the point now where this is all I do, so, well, this is what I do, but I do other projects. Bring in different income, like the cut cream, the CBD cut cream. I wrote a couple books, and, so there's things that I've created that through my exposure that have helped economically.
I have a question. Oh,
sure you do. You got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I got it. That's why I got this show. But I guess also to put in perspective for people, did you work Klitschko fight with Joshua?
Yeah.
That fight,
yes.
That fight was huge. It was a massive fight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Klitschko got cut, right? And you had to work on that cut. Now, if you're not good at what you do, that fight, with all the media and all the millions of dollars that are being poured into that fight's over. You know? And
it's funny you say it's funny you say that, because as you look at the commentating, I don't think people knew he got cut till after. But he had a real, which is right on.
Yeah, right there.
Maybe they mentioned it once, but it was never a factor.
Well, for me, I knew because I could see what you were doing. You know what I mean? Like I saw you working, and I knew you weren't in there just for fun. You know what I mean? So I knew it was thing. And then afterwards, you realize how serious it was and where it was. Can you speak to what that's like working with that pressure and working with someone like Klitschko versus Joshua? The magnitude of that fight, the kind of money that's being thrown around, that creates that amount of pressure, because it's one thing to stop a cut at a local police boys fight club, which is great,
right?
But it's another thing with, what it means. And every minute that fight goes on, there's more live TV and more money being made. You know what I mean? So there's so much pressure for that fight to continue because more eyes watching. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's entertainment. It's entertainment, but I'll give you a behind the scenes stuff.
Please do.
Story which kind of give you chills as I explain it to you. So, I've been with Vladimir and Vitaly for 12 years. And a great story because in 1990, I say 92, Vitaly says 91, but when the Soviet Union first broke, we took a team of professional boxers and kickboxers to Kiev, Ukraine, to fight the Ukrainians. And at that time, I had Mark Longo, which was a kickboxer. So then I got to see the Klitschkos, and they were young at that time, but they were already massive. They had billboards up in them. And so I got to see them at the event. The event was like a mega event. It was the first professional combat sport fight that were authorized in the Ukraine after the Soviet Union broke. So I got to see them, but I never spoke to them. And years later, they came and trained in Las Vegas, and I started speaking to them, and they remembered the event and all that. So if you remember, Vladimir Klitschko did the movie Ocean's 11 with Lennox Lewis. So I came on as his cutman in the movie, right? And then when he came out of when he lost his world title to Lehman Brewster, his first comeback fight, he asked Emmanuel Stewart to get the guy that was a cutman in the movie. So they brought me on board. So the first fight I did with Vladimir Klitschko, and you talk about having confidence and believing in you, he ended up with you're talking about that vein, right? He ended up with a big cut here. He didn't look that good, but this is the worst cut because you have that big vein, and it's going to continue to bleed. I've worked on them before when Forrest Griffin fought Shogun. Same thing, right? So I understand those cuts, and they're extremely hard to control. Jay Heron, when he fought Jonathan Goulet, bloodiest fight I ever worked. Anyway,
so much blood.
Yeah. Anyway, so with Vladimir, he ended up with that cut, and it was like in the 5th round. I knew he didn't look great, but I knew he was winning the fight. And I made the decision when he came and sat down. I told Vitaly and Vladimir, and Emmanuel couldn't hear, but I said, look, you got a bad cut. You're winning the fight. I'm going to have the doctor stop the fight. So when the doctor came in, she says, well, what are you thinking? I've worked with her before, so she knows my capabilities. I went like this, and I opened up. I said, it's pretty bad. She stopped the fight, went to the scorecards. Vladimir won the fight. And then he ended up winning the world title. But fast forward 10, 12 years later, Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko, biggest fight in a long time. 90,000 people, Wembley Stadium, all over the world. And I didn't get into London until Thursday night because my daughter Carla had got married in the island of Crete on Wednesday. So right after the wedding, man, I had to leave. But I didn't see Vladimir and Vitaly till Friday at the weigh-ins. We're in the green room waiting to get on the scale. And they've always had a lot of confidence, a lot of trust in me. And they knew if I said anything, it's always the truth, But I'm talking to them, and finally at the end, I put my hand on Vladimir, and I say, Vladimir, don't worry about nothing tomorrow. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son. And I'll tell you where that story came from, right? So I left him at that because I know and Rob, the night before a fight, his head is running and his adrenaline's going up and it's going down. So I laid those final words on Vladimir, and come fast forward into the fight, right? Before Michael Buffer does the announcements, it's 90,000 people, all fans all over the world. I'm putting the final Vaseline on Vladimir. We're this far apart. And he says, you could call me son. But I knew, Fabricio, that I had gotten into his mind the night before, and it turned out to be one of the greatest fights that he's ever said. He called me, after the fight, hey, Daddy. He goes, thank you. He says, it meant so much to me because it gave me that confidence to know that you were going to take care of me. And he says, Stitch, of all the fights I've done in my career, I never got the respect like I did in this fight. And if you remember Balboa, when Rocky fought his last fight, which I was in the corner of Antonio Tarver, the fans are saying, Rocky, Rocky, Rocky. Well, the fans in Wembley Stadium were saying, please go, please go, please go. Talk about chills, brother. That was an epic moment. Had a great time.
And the Klitschko brothers, for I don't know if anyone that's watching this podcast doesn't know who they are, you probably shouldn't be watching. But the Klitschko brothers in Europe, though, are huge. They're massive. In Germany, it's probably I think it's the highest rating thing on television. You know what I mean? Regardless of anything, when the Klitschkos fight, it's through the roof. Ukraine, massive. So the guys that you're working on are like absolute superstars. They're like pride of a nation, basically, So that's I find that, it does give you chills, doesn't it? Like The
Yes, I'm telling you. Yeah.
what
But I tell you, let me add with them and closing with the Klitschkos is all the people I've worked with throughout my career being as high profile as they are. Now Vitaly is the mayor of Kiev, right? And Vladimir, of course, is Vladimir, but they were so humble and so respectful to everybody, the fans, everybody. They were respectful to sparring partners. They would pay him good money, everybody. They were just top of the line. They still are top of the line people.
They seem to be like gentlemen, you know what I mean? And that is really it's not just a persona, that is who they are.
Yeah, that's 100% natural.
That's cool, man. That is very cool. I wanted to ask you, can you talk to us about the different types of cuts? Because it's not just, again, for people who don't know, it's not just you have a cut. There's different types of cuts. There's cuts that cut to the bone. There's cuts that cut right on the eyebrow because you got the bone here. There's cuts that cut underneath the eye that might look bad, that aren't as debilitating to a fight. But can you talk about cuts? Can you talk about the different types of cuts and working within a minute, working within that minute?
Yeah, of course. But real quick, I got to rewind a little bit and finish my story about Leon Taps.
Oh, please, go.
In Sydney, Australia, before I forget, because I thought it was so great, man. So we're in a Chinese restaurant, we're eating, and those little hot, dry red peppers that they put in the food for flavoring? Yeah. Well, I'm eating like this, and I look at Leon, and he's sweating bullets, man. Just sweating bullets. And I think, Leon, what's wrong? What's wrong? He goes, man, these are hot. I said, Leon, you're not supposed to eat them, brother. They're just there for the flavor. Man, he was sweating bullets, bro. I'm telling you. And I you know how you laugh and your stomach hurts so much? Yeah. So I had to throw that story out. That was my story of Sydney, Australia with Leon Taps.
Where was, do you remember the restaurant?
Oh, no. Come on, man. It's too many places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too many places.
Because
it was close to the docking areas and the downtown where we stayed at, by the water and all that.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the name.
No, because the reason I ask it is because there's some good Sichuan restaurants there in Chinatown, and man, the food you can buy it. It's so hot that if he ate those chilies like that,
that was funny, man. Anyway, so let's talk about cuts because there are different kind of cuts and multiple cuts, and I always teach cutmen. I always prepare for the worst case scenario, and but the cuts the number one cut that's the worst is that one right there. The one that has the big vein. If you pop that vein, it's gonna bleed. It's like a faucet. And I say the bloodiest fight I ever worked with Jay Haran when he fought Jonathan Goulet. He took a knee right here and just sliced that. The cut was only about this big, but he sliced that vein and it poured and poured and poured blood. So much blood that fighters had blood from the top of the head to the bottom of their feet. And so much blood that made me nauseated. Only time I've ever been nauseated. And I knew it was gonna be a problem because they asked me, well, Stitch, what do you think about the cut? No, he's all right. He'll go one more round. So I mixed the adrenaline chloride, which is a vasoconstrictor, with adrenaline or with Vaseline. I'll mix that. First, I'll apply the adrenaline, close the blood vessels. And then I'll apply the Vaseline with the adrenaline as the final topical. Well, I knew when I covered it, blood just spurted out of there like a dam. And I said, nah, it's not going to go, And but that was the bloodiest fight ever. And that ring mat is actually Randy Couture's gym. So that's the worst. The ones right down here, like the one that Vladimir Klitschko had when he fought Anthony Joshua, those are very, very tough also because the tissue is very, very thin. And then the blood, the only where that the blood could go is into the eyes. Same thing with this one. The blood will go into the eyes both ways. These down here, this one on the nose, there's no danger, no disadvantage. But God, they're the hardest ones to stop because it's just nothing but cartilage. So it's very hard for those blood vessels to close. These down here are the least ones you have to worry about. The swelling, same thing with the swelling. But these, even though they look bad, you can't freak out on blood. Even though they look bad, they're not going to give a fighter a disadvantage. And I remember Kenny Florian when he fought Sean Sherrick. I think Sherrick gave him an elbow, and he got cut in the head. And Sherrick is on the bottom, and Kenny Florian's on top. And I take that back. Reverse Kenny Florian was on the bottom. Sean Sherrick was on top. And Kenny had so much blood in his eye sockets because his eyes he was on the bottom. So when he got to me, it's the first time I ever worked with a fighter that had so much blood without getting cut. But I had to clean out his eyes and I just kind of washed them down and wiped them out, so yeah, there's different kind of cuts. The head, some of them could be very dangerous, or they could bleed, but they're not that bad. So like I said, the main thing is when the fighter is at disadvantage, that's when you should really take care of the fighter and give him that one more round, or have the doctor stop the fight.
What about, have you ever dealt with really bad hematomas where you're like, what the fuck? Like I have to, well, like real bad ones that you see sometimes. Have you dealt with it?
Yeah, in boxing, I worked with Fernando Vargas when he fought Shane Mosley. He ended up with a big old hematoma.
Oh, yes.
And keep in mind now, whenever you get a hematoma, it's an accumulation of blood that makes the swelling, right? And so the old thing of getting the iron and trying to move it, it's an old myth, because, and I'm talking about smaller swelling. If you try to move that swelling away, you're going to move it into tissue that's not damaged, and then it comes back, and now instead of here, it's going to be a little bit bigger. Well, this hematoma, there's really nothing you could do outside of just hoping that his eyes just don't close completely.
So there's nothing you can do with a hematoma.
No, the old cut me Mick, that's bullshit. As a matter of fact, when I did Creed, I told Stallone, I said, man, you know how many times I had to kind of correct that myth of cut me Mick? I said, it doesn't happen, number one, because we're not surgeons. And if you were, you'd be doing it in a dirty facility, for infection and all that. But then you would also get blood in the eye. So why would you do it? So that's a myth for all those that have seen the Rocky movies.
I was going to ask you, I was about to ask you that. It's funny that you say that. Have you spoken with like Stallone, and said to him, look, mate, there's a few of those things that aren't like exactly like what you said. Can you talk on that? Can you expand on that a little bit? Like,
yeah, I told him that.
Cut me Mick, that, and other things like, what was that like talking with Stallone about that kind of stuff?
It was tremendous. With him and Michael B. Jordan, I spent 6 weeks with him one-on-one. The three of us working together in the same team, and Michael B. Jordan every day, just him and I and his friend Royce, wrapping his hands in the dressing room and just talking shit and all that. But, as Stallone in the first Creed movie, when I got the script, my name was Marcel. And I said, nah, man, I don't know anybody named Marcel, But when it was time for Rocky to introduce the team to Adonis, he says, oh, this is Stitch. He's the best Cutman in Philadelphia. Man, Fabricio, deep inside my heart is going, yes, 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 And that was one, and that was, so he threw my name in instead of Marcel. And then the second time we did the take, I liked that one. They didn't use it. But he says, oh, there's Stitch. He's so good as a cut man, he should have been a surgeon. And I thought that was great lines, right? But the next day, I said, Sly, I want to let you know, man, I want to thank you for using my name. He says, no, he goes, it has to be authentic, and that's the kind of guy. When I did Balboa, even though I was in Mason the Lion's corner, Antonio Tarver, Stallone wrote, directed, and acted in Balboa. And I got to see his work, and he's a master of what he does, bro. I can see why he writes all his stuff, but such a nice guy, very giving guy. And he knows the game. And I told him I was impressed with him in Creed 2 when he started working the corners. And I said, for you not being in our game, you gave the right instructions with the right amount of time. You were talking about a 1 minute break. So he was very, very astute at that. Very impressive.
Michael B. Jordan, your interactions with him, was he a good guy as well?
Super guy. And yeah, with Sylvester Stallone, name 3-4 people that have said they've done 3 movies with Sylvester Stallone. I'm one of them, So that always blows my mind. But Michael B. Jordan, yeah, what a nice kid, man. Super, super kid. The first Creed, I really guided him a lot on, because I spent, every morning wrapping his hands. And then throughout 16 hours of filming, it was him and I, Stallone, and the other guys. But I got a good liking to him. And I think about the 5th week of our training, I'm wrapping his hands. I said, Michael, I'm gonna knight you as a fighter, because everything that you've done, technique-wise, making the sport better, just the personality you are a boxer, you are a fighter. So I knighted him as a fighter, and got along great. But on the second one, same thing. I'm telling him, I said, Michael, I'm so proud of you guys. You and Tessa Thompson and Ryan Coogler, all of you young guys that have excelled in doing this. And he says, Stitch, and like this, I'm talking to him like I'm talking to you, Fabricio. He says, we went from actors to writers, producers, and directors. And he says, I'm directing Creed 3, and you're with me as long as you want. And I thought that was such an honorable thing. And of course, then this stupid COVID kicked in for this year, because normally we would film, our parts would be March and April. And, I think we finished like September or something like that, and or March and April. But yeah, he had told me that, and then this COVID kicked in. So I was telling my wife today, I got a feeling that I'm going to get a call for Creed 3 in December. So if that happens, you can say you heard it here first. Just intuition.
Awesome. What's it like being in movies? Do you enjoy being in movies, or do you like being in movies, or do you like still being in the corner and the nitty gritty, getting in there, doing the cuts?
Well, in the movies, I'm doing the nitty gritty. I'm doing the cuts.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Right?
But do you enjoy being in movies?
I'm not an actor, brother. I'll tell you. I'll be first to tell you I'm not an actor. So it's easy doing what I do, right? Because it's what I do. Let me fix this here. But yeah, I loved it. How can you not love being, into somebody else's world, doing what we do in our world? And like Ryan Coogler, that wrote and directed the Creed, and he's also directed Black Panther. Young kid. At that time, he was 27, 28 years old, from Oakland. And I lived in Oakland, right? But I told him, I said, Ryan, if I see something that's not correct, authentic, I'm going to let you know. He goes, Stitch, we welcome you. We brought you in for that, And when I did Creed 2, during one of the first day I got there, I'm watching them film, and Victor, which is Ivan Drago's son, is doing his scene where he knocks out a guy, and the guy's down on the ground, and they have extras as doctors, but the guy picked his head up, and he has the flashlight on his eyes. I told the director, I said, you know what? That's not right, man, because when a guy gets knocked out like that, yeah, you could check his eyes, but you don't want to move him because you don't know what kind of injury he has. So they redid that scene, bro.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I helped them, yeah. But like I told him, you're representing our sport, and I want to make sure that this movie is done as authentic as it can be. And they welcome that.
I want to ask you, with all the experience you've had, everything that you did, what advice would you give 30-year-old Jacob?
Well, like I tell a lot of other people, what I would tell Jacob is continue following your dreams, because they do come true, and I look at myself, I'm always that little kid that was a farm worker, Arbisha, that is my motivation, because basically I came from the dirt of the field, and where I'm at now, I appreciate every moment that I'm here, but it's been because I followed my dreams, and I've always, mentally, I've always told myself, if it don't work out, I know at least I can know how to pick peaches and tomato and cotton and figs, I know how to do that. So that's always been my mindset, but that's the way my family has always been, is to go forward. When you start at the bottom, it's easier to go to the top than starting at the top and then trying to stay there.
If you like now, when people look at it, yeah, everything's worked out great. Like when you look at it from the outside, even I spoke to Burt Watson a couple of weeks ago, same deal. When you look at Burt, you're like, yeah, he had it all figured out. But in your life, if you had to pick the worst setbacks that you've had, but that may or may not have become actually blessings in disguise, would you be able to pinpoint some of your worst setbacks and did they become a positive?
Yeah, I know. I've been real blessed, Barbijo, on the path that I've walked on. But I remember when I first moved to Las Vegas, and I've been here 26 years. My brother Michael lived here in Las Vegas, and we didn't live far from him. But he came to the house one time, and my wife was crying, and he thought maybe we got in a fight. But at that point, I couldn't pay my rent, so he lent me some money, and from there, I never looked back, and I paid him back, and I paid him with interest. But that was hard at that point, you know. But that's been it, you know. I mean, all the other stuff I could put up with, you know. But that was, to me, that was a defining moment in my life where I didn't have to look back because I was blessed to be doing the things that I was doing. But I created a lot of that, you know, on a marketing aspect. And I've always been a marketing savant, working with R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company for 23 years in sales and marketing, but always having that mentality of how to maximize. And, you know, I've continued doing that. I've built up some programs. There's, you know, the Maloney brothers from Australia, right?
Yeah, of course.
I worked with them here, both Jason and Andrew, when they fought here. All the times that they fought. And great kids, man. You know, they've become family, but Andrew, in the first fight when he lost his world title, ended up with a bunch of bruising and all that. Well, I'm working with a CBD company, and they created a cream for cuts for the healing process. After you get cut, then you apply it, and it has stem cell and vitamin E and collagen and, of course, CBD and other things. And when they contacted me, they asked, you know, well, I asked them, well, what proof source do you have? Because everybody has CBD now. And they said, well, that's what we called you. So I said, all right, well, I'm working the bare knuckle fights also, which is a new revitalized sport here in the States. But it's a great sport because they all get cut.
I was about to ask you that. That was my next question. It's funny. Go on.
Yeah. So I talked to Jay Timms, which was CBD, to go with me to Florida. And as these fighters get cut, they get sewn up in the dressing room. He takes a picture of them. He gives them the cream. They apply it every day. And a week later, they send us a picture. So the results have been excellent. Anyway, Andrew Maloney had a big old, just bruised up big time. And I gave him the cream. And a week later, he sent me the response. And it was tremendous. So I'm working with them also. You know, in fact, I'll show you real quick. I don't know if you can see it. That's Jason, right?
Yeah, Maloney.
And a week later, look at him, handsome young man.
Really?
You know, so the product works big time. And
what's the name of the product exactly again? If you say it again,
it's right here, the cut cream.
Awesome.
Stitch Beam, use my name. So I'm endorsing them. I'm part of the program there. So yeah, you know, and I'm going to start doing the marketing for them. But I encourage everybody, you know, just in case. That's going to be my motto is, you know, get the cut cream just in case, you know, because once you get cut, then you can apply it. And then, and it just helps the healing process. Let me see here. So, yeah, so I've been working on that. One More Round, which was one of my sponsors before when I did the YouTubers with KSI and Logan Paul.
Yeah.
Mark Zucker. Yeah, Mark Zucker saw me and we reunited and we started the relaunching of One More Round, and then the stupid COVID kicked in. But once it kicks out, the next year we're going to be going back with One More Round. And so you know, I've been blessed with doing a lot of the nice things, and you know, I just keep going forward.
What's the difference with bare knuckles versus, say, MMA versus boxing cuts? Like the difference. Obviously, bare knuckle, there's more cuts, but are they different types of cuts between the different types of gloves?
Yeah, we had like multiple, you know, cuts. Jason Knight, I think when he fought I can't remember, Artem, I think, yeah. I thought he had 10 cuts on him. He ended up with like 12 cuts. And then Artem was jacked up too. And so cuts are multiple. And they happen, even though there's only 2-minute rounds, they happen right away. And I can see the punch. Once it comes back, you can see the slit, and you can see them bleeding already. So those are real multiple. I'm trying to see if I can find a picture. But MMA, the cuts are deeper because, you know, elbows or knees or something like that. But, you know, they're multiple also. But you just, you know, you have to learn how to work on all of them, you know, and that's what makes this fun. But it's fun working the bare knuckle fights. I can't find it, but yeah, Jason Knight had like 12 cuts.
I remember Jason Knight's face was like a mess.
Yeah, they have a rule which I think MMA needs to apply because cuts are inevitable. But they have a ruling where if a guy they're gonna get cut. But if it's multiple cuts or it's affecting them, the referee can call timeout. They bring him to me, and the doctor's next to me, and I have 30 seconds to clean him up, and the doctor has those 30 seconds to evaluate whether he can continue or not. And I think that's a good rule. So, yeah, it's fun working them. But being this COVID, I'm staying home.
Is it harder to work on all those small cuts versus the big, deep cuts in MMA?
No. It's, a lot of times, a lot of the small cuts, direct pressure works well. Because how many times have you got cut, Fabricio, and you put your finger on the cut, and a bit later it stops bleeding because blood coagulates itself. And as long as you understand those, you go after the primary ones. You go after the ones that are going to, give that fighter a disadvantage. So you have to evaluate that. But there's times when I'm, I got my hand on, I'm working on 5 cuts.
Okay. I want to ask you another thing is, what's been the best investments you've made, whether it's in terms of, could be financial, could be education, could be time, whatever. But if you had to think about some of the best investments you've made in your life?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. And I think giving back, educating, I think, if ever, when I leave this game, when I retire, what do I want people to know me as making this game better, changing it, making it safer through education. And that's the legacy I want to leave, because going back when I was learning to be a cutman, when I still lived in California, I went to a boxing show, and this guy did a good job on cuts. And I went over there and I said, I'm trying to learn to be a cutman. Can you tell me what you did? And he says, hey, fuck you. He goes, I'm taking this to my grave, and you got to learn like me. And he walked away, and Fabricio, I felt about this big, and I said, I'm never going to be like this man.
Fuck, what a good guy.
Yeah, that was kind of it. Was only boxing at that time, right? So being a martial artist, of course, our mentality is different than boxers. So my whole object has been to teach. And, that's why I put out some videos, and, I've done seminars and all that. But people ask me questions all the time. I try to answer them. So going back to that is my reward is what I leave.
Okay. Do you have a course or anything like a course that people can go and see you and do this course to be a certified cutman? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, it's I've put a couple of videos out, giving the fighter one more round. That's available at cutmanforhiresupplies.com. In fact, all you coaches and cutmen, I recommend going to cutmanforhiresupplies.com, because Juan Ramirez carries everything that we need and the best of the best, right? But no, so there's a video I put there. I made one years ago, and I've done seminars, but with the schedule that I've had, I love doing seminars, but I just can't lock anything down, because I get a call. But if anybody has any questions, I always try to answer.
You know why I say this? Because I'm a teacher, like I teach at college and that. I've stopped now last couple of years, but I did for years. And I was thinking, if you did like some sort of like course, even if it was like an online course where people could be certified to be a cutman or something like that, or certified to have finished the course, because you're not going to be a certified cutman just by doing the course. But I think that like, fuck, I'd sign up to that. That's an interesting thing, like to learn from someone like you with a wealth of knowledge that you have, to have an actual course. You know how like there's the referees course now and everything, you know what I mean? Before they never really had that. And there's like Big John McCarthy has his referees course and that. And I think like someone like you having like a cutman's course, like that would be, because I would do it even if I never was going to be a cutman, which I don't know, I'm never say never, but even if I wasn't, just from a coach's perspective, even from a fighter's perspective, you'd want to know, well, where do I want to hit these guys flush? To a lot of these guys, I can guarantee you, no matter their level, they'd know that if I hit the guy here, I'm going to fuck him up. But they don't know that there's a vein that goes straight through there that the cutman's not going to fix. So I think that's such an interesting thing. If there was some sort of course like that would be interesting.
Yeah, you know what? And my son-in-law is in TV and radio, and he has his own shop. I'm going to talk to him about that. I think that's easy to do, and I think I'll do that. I'm going to take you up on that, bro, and and you'll be one of the first ones to know. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. But
dude,
yeah,
if you do it, I'll be one of the first ones to sign up. I promise you that.
But and you brought up a point, because I always say my analogy is a coach will show a fighter how to fight, but nobody shows a coach how to take care of the fighter.
That's true as well.
I think I'll do that. I have time with all this going on, but I think understand now everything is social media, and I think maybe I will get on that bandwagon.
Yeah,
thanks for the information.
No, man,
thanks for the drive. But let me say that's the way it shit happens to me. Fabrizio, is to this point, I've never asked for one job. I swear I've never asked for one job. I'm just a real proud Mexican, right? And but ideas like this, and that's something that falls within something that I could do, and take advantage of the social media stuff. So I'm gonna work on that today.
No, awesome. No, man. As soon as you do it, I will sign up to do that, because that seems like a very good thing. I'd love to learn. That's something that I've always wanted to learn, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because now you mentioned the name certified. I'm not a big proponent of that, because I study Stitch's seminar. I'm a Cutman now. Well, no, you're not a Cutman. And like I say, just because you wrap a good hand doesn't make you a Cutman. And I've worked with different youth boxers because they had Cutmen that wrapped hands, but they were cuts, and when they got cut, they didn't know what to do. So there is a difference in that.
Yeah, I think that's the same as like when you get the level 1 coaching accreditation, and I think like that doesn't make you a coach. I can go do a level 1 coaching certification for tennis right now, and that doesn't make me Roger Federer or Roger Federer's coach or whoever. But I think there is also a difference between saying, no, this doesn't make me a certified Cutman, but it does mean that I completed Stitch's course. You know what I mean? And if I've completed Stitch's course, and if I do an additional 200 hours, I can be a level 1 Cutman. And if I do Stitch's second course plus an additional 200 hours, I am now level 2 and level 3 Cutman. I can work X amount of fights, and then maybe you could have that as a tiering system throughout, like, you know what I mean? To work UFC, for example, to work UFC, K1, all the top tier, you've got to be a level 3 Cutman, and you can only get that by A, B, C, and D. I think,
and it's okay to do the books and do the videos, but unfortunately, our job is
you got to be in there
clarity through being right in there.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think I like your analogy, and I could always leave a question booth open for questions, because people are going to have questions and I'll have answers. So in that aspect, yeah, you just gotta be careful who you choose, and like Triple G, I work with Triple G, right? Well, he's fighting December the 19th in Florida, but I'm not going because of the COVID. I don't trust the flying. So they asked me who would I recommend, and I recommended Paul Querido, that he's worked with me in MMA and he's worked with me in bare knuckle fights. But I also told him, if you look at the movie Creed 2, he's the cut man for the Russians. So he's worked with Russians before. But my point to that, Fabricio, is, and I told him, I said, look, I would always recommend a guy that's had MMA and bare knuckle fight experience as a cut man, because you work in boxing don't mean you're going to get cuts all the time. And these guys have gotten cuts. So that's who I recommend.
Oh, that's awesome. Stitch, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really, really, really appreciate you doing this podcast. Where can people reach you? How can people get to you? What projects do you have coming up? And yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate it. Good interview. Thanks. I really had a good time. But I'm at Stitch Duran, and I always return, messages and all that. But definitely recommend everybody, the coaches and Cutman, to go to Cutman for Hire Supplies. If you're going to do it the right way. And Juan Ramirez has the products that are A1. And I have my own Stitch premium line, the Stitch tape and the KO swell. And, I was selling it myself, but I was traveling so much, Fabricio, that I didn't want to get orders out late. So through a dream, I had a dream that Juan Ramirez, Cutman for Hire, was carrying my products. So I called him and I said, would you be interested in carrying my products? And of course, you know, just the association. So he's carrying my products. I'm exclusive with him because such a good guy. And I told him my job is for you to grow your company and live happily ever after. So Cutman for Hire supplies, and they're also going to be having the cut cream. They're going to have a page on their website as to where you could get the cut cream. But I would recommend all coaches to have it just in case, because your fighter's going to get cut one way or the other, you know. And one more round, we'd expect to see one more round come out strong in the new year. And right now we're filming a documentary based on my book. The book is called From the Fields to the Garden, and that's available at Amazon.com. The Fields growing up as a farm worker, and my goal was to make it to Madison Square Garden. So there's a documentary being filmed right now based on my life, and you know they're looking at the high spots, Netflix and Showtime, HBO, and all that. So that's coming out in the new year. But thanks for having me on board, bro.
Man,
had a good time.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you so much. Yeah, man. Hopefully we'll speak again, man. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I expect you to get me on. I got to tell you, that's only the tip of the iceberg, bro. In stories, I tell you, nobody has stories like I do.
No, I believe that.
Yeah. All right, my man. Well, all the best, Fabrizio.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.